When you think of a global summit like the World Economic Forum in Davos, you picture neutral ground, right? It's supposed to be a place where leaders can get together and tackle the world's biggest problems. But what happens when that ground isn't so neutral anymore? In a world where alliances are constantly shifting, it's a pretty big question. So, what could that actually look like? Well, let's dive into one really fascinating speculative vision. This is the big question we're unpacking today. We're looking at a thought experiment that imagines a future where the entire global agenda gets reshaped by a single dominant force. A future where a forum for debate pretty much turns into a stage for demands. Okay, so before we go any further, I gotta be super clear about something. Everything we're about to explore comes from one single opinion piece, published by Shasta Unfiltered. This is not a prediction. Think of it as a deep dive into a really detailed and, frankly, provocative what-if scenario about the future of global cooperation. And the stage for this whole thing? A potential Davos in 2026. So here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll break down the article's argument into 5 key parts. First, the basic premise of this totally reimagined Davos. Then, we'll look at the specific flashpoint the author uses to make their case. After that, we'll see how the entire agenda gets transformed, check out the fallout, and finally, consider the big verdict on the forum's future. All right, first up, let's set the scene. The whole scenario really hinges on one big idea, that the very nature of the World Economic Forum gets completely flipped on its head by a massive shift in global power. So picture this. It's the 56th annual WEF. But this time, President Trump doesn't just show up as another world leader. No, he arrives as the absolute center of gravity. And he brings with him the largest U.S. delegation ever. This isn't just about showing up. It's about projecting overwhelming power from the second Air Force One hits the tarmac. And this slide really nails the core contrast. I mean, traditional Davos is all about collaboration, right? Shared goals. But in this speculative version, the forum becomes a stage for one nation's agenda. It forces other world leaders into a position where, according to the article, just staying quiet becomes a much safer bet than trying to have an open debate. Okay, so to make this whole power shift feel real, the article doesn't just talk in hypotheticals. It gives us a central conflict, a really high-stakes geopolitical move that acts as the story's big flashpoint. Here's the bombshell the article drops. The Trump administration brings back its push to acquire Greenland from Denmark. But this time, it's not just some off-the-cuff idea. It's framed as an urgent national security issue, a must-have move to counter Russia and China in the Arctic, which is just packed with resources.
Now here's the kicker. It's not just a demand. It's an ultimatum. The article claims the U.S. threatens to slap tariffs, starting at 10% and quickly ramping up to 25% on goods from 8 specific NATO allies if they stand in the way. So this isn't just talk. It's a very real economic threat designed to force everyone to fall in line.
But Denmark's response, as imagined in the piece, is anything but quiet. It's swift and it's defiant. This quote from their Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, is used to just perfectly capture Europe's immediate pushback against what they see as straight-up blackmail. It really sets the stage for a massive diplomatic showdown. And they don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk. The article lays out a total Danish government boycott of the forum, huge public protests, and accusations that the WEF is actually undermining their sovereignty. The key takeaway here is that this pressure campaign creates an immediate and very, very public split among countries that are supposed to be allies. Now, this conflict isn't just some sideshow happening in a back room. According to the article, it fundamentally reshapes the entire purpose and the content of the World Economic Forum itself. Just look at the difference here. The article argues that the traditional pillars of Davos, things like climate action and sustainability, are basically just tossed aside. And in their place, a whole new agenda pops up, one that's laser-focused on themes that just happen to align perfectly with the U.S. administration's priorities, things like AI, crypto, and a very specific kind of economic resilience. And to back this up, the article points to a Politico analysis, which apparently described this as a sharp shift, and noted that topics like gender diversity have just sort of slipped down the agenda. This is presented as Exhibit A that the forum's content is being actively molded to fit the most powerful player in the room. So, with the agenda basically hijacked and this shocking ultimatum hanging over everyone's heads, what happens next? How do America's traditional allies react? Well, the article paints a picture of a pretty fractured and, panicked response. especially from Europe. The European Union is basically sent into a tailspin. Behind the scenes, we're told they're holding emergency talks, even prepping massive retaliatory tariffs. But out in public, their official line is super cautious: engage, not escalate. You can see they're trapped, right? They're caught between wanting to push back hard and being terrified of a full-blown trade war. It's so messy, they have to schedule an emergency summit just to try and figure out what to do.
And this quote, attributed to German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, just captures that dilemma perfectly. The threat to retaliate is there, but what they really want, desperately, is a way to de-escalate. It shows a Europe that's completely on the defensive, just reacting to the situation instead of shaping it.
So all of this brings us to the article's really powerful conclusion. I mean, if Davos can be so easily bent into a platform for one country's agenda, what does that even mean for its future? Is it still relevant at all? The piece throws this really stark assessment out there from political economist Mark Blythe. It is a blunt, no-holds-barred verdict. The suggestion is pretty clear. Once a forum like this gives up its role as a neutral space for big ideas, it loses its whole purpose and maybe even its reason to exist. The article also paints a picture of the fiery debate it imagines would be raging online. You've got two clear camps. On one side, supporters cheering what they see as the end of the WEF and its agenda, and on the other, critics just slamming the forum's irrelevance and calling the whole thing bending the knee to power. But in the end, the article argues this isn't just about 1 week in the Swiss Alps. This whole scenario is a symbol for a much bigger question, a potential move away from the entire post-World War II order, away from cooperation and toward a world of America-first bilateral deals. This thought experiment reflects some very real debates happening right now about the future of globalization. The article even touches on speculation about huge shifts in the global financial system itself. And that really is the central question this entire piece leaves us with. Does a scenario like this represent the forceful, messy birth of a new world order, or is it just the final, sputtering end of an old one? The article just leaves that question hanging there, a pretty stark reminder of just how fragile our global order might be.